came up.
Hold on to it.
Oh, okay.
We are recording? We are recording, and we're going to call the meeting to order for the Gardner Board of Health. It's March 24th, 2025, and we are in the Mayor's Conference Room. Can I have it quiet, please? And the time is 4:32 p.m. Meeting is called to order. Any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium, subject to reasonable requirements of the chair as to the number, placement, and operation of equipment used so as not to interfere with the conduct of the meeting. Any person intending to make such a recording shall notify the chair forthwith. All documents referenced or used during the meeting must be submitted in duplicate to the clerk of the board or committee. All documents shall become part of the official record of the meeting. Okay, first item on the agenda is review minutes from January 27th, 2025 and February 24th, 2025. On the minutes for the January 27th, the blue tabs are where corrections were made, and want to make sure that that's clear on what was intended.
Yeah, so I think, I could be wrong, but I know there was a couple other changes made, but I had pointed out when those were emailed that it was the final, I just want to make sure, because I don't know if we discussed it at the last meeting, but the final paragraph on the Anthony's hearing, there was the motion to reduce the suspension, and I believe in the previous version it said because there were no violations in the last 36 months. And so that has been changed, and I wasn't sure if we all had seen that and agreed to it.
No, this was, that's why she had made Brandy put little blue things for us to see.
Because I had sent her an email, but I wasn't sure if the three of us had actually...
I saw that when that was going to come up.
Okay.
So I think that was what was...
and I think there were a couple other things that were updated from what we discussed last time, but that's...
I did reword some of the paragraphs that didn't work.
Right.
More just grammatical.
Yeah, it's like a grammatical problem, it just wasn't understandable, so I did reword a few of those as well.
So do we have a motion to accept these?
I can make a motion to accept the meetings of January 27th, 2025 with the corrections that we currently have in hand.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The minutes are accepted and put into record. Okay, the next minutes are February 24th, 2025. And I know there's a lot of information in here. We want to make sure that we have everything accurate. So I know I was rereading it again because there's so much information. I mean, Brandy did a great job of trying to summarize and put in deep, well, really, we want to make it detailed as much as possible, but there's a few things.
So I had a couple of questions on, under the summary overview of the landfill, the paragraph regarding state regulations. You see the one that starts with regarding state regulations.
The big one on the second page.
Yeah. So if you go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines where it says there are maximum contaminant limits, secondary contaminant limits, and then there's the guideline standards. I'm guessing that should that first one be primary contaminant limits, secondary, and then the guideline standards? Is that what the intent of that was, or?
I know when they went and explained all of how they looked at the limits. I'm not
Right,
sure.
But I mean,
it goes on to explain that,
I think the maximum and secondary are right, and then the guideline standards, I don't think that was the right words that got put in there.
Secondary ones are for aesthetic qualities, like the taste and the color.
Right.
Yeah,
But isn't
Primary
primary for
are-
drinking water, isn't that
for health
normal?
concerns.
Or health concerns, like, what, don't they all have a maximum? I'm not sure, is that a category maximum? I mean,
I think it's a maximum for primary and maximum for secondary.
Yeah.
So that, you're right, that isn't very clear from that
Right.
sentence.
so I think, that's why I'm asking, I guess, should it say there are primary limits, secondary limits, and the guideline standards, and then, I mean, the maximum is what we're using the word limits for, I'm guessing, right? I mean, is that the context of that?
I mean, I'm not even sure if that's I mean, because we're looking at exceedance.
I would just knock out that sentence and just say the maximum contamination limits are, and then, the primary, it goes on to say the primary are for health concerns, what harms humans
Yeah.
are adjusted, so we really don't need that sentence in there at all, it just makes it more confusing.
Right, and again, I go back to, the sentence you want to start on there, the maximum shouldn't that be primary contamination limits? Because it goes on in the next sentence to say
Yes.
primary contaminants are for health concerns.
Yes, because it says then there's secondary. So
Right.
then there's said primary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and does that, then their secondary contaminants have any place in that sentence, or is that?
Yeah, so this one, this would be wording wise, oh,
Then there's secondary.
this is then there's secondary, but the primary maximum contamination
Yeah.
limits would be right there. Okay, yeah, you've got that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's confusing, then the primary contaminants are for health concerns.
And so do we want to knock out that sentence before that? Because I don't
Yeah,
really
we're
add
just gonna,
anything.
we're just gonna cut that sentence.
Yeah.
And then just substitute primary for maximum in the sentence that follows, is that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think that makes
Well,
a lot more clear.
But then later on, it talks about the secondary maximum. And I don't know if they're using that.
Well, again, I guess my point is maximum is not a category, it's just
No,
a.
it's not. They're
So,
looking at the levels, the maximum level, so.
And then there's guideline standards where there isn't a limit set by the EPA or Mass
Right.
DEP.
okay, so,
So that definitely needs to be clarified.
We will reword that paragraph.
It says the drinking water standard for 1,4-dioxane is a guideline standard, and that's the 0.3 parts per billion.
And the guideline standards that, where there isn't a limit set by the EPA and Mass DEP, but the DEP, state uses different information to set a guideline standard, and the drinking water standard that's all kind of confusing too. I mean, like I said, she did a great job with trying to get this down here, but some of it is not clear. The solid wasteland.
Then there's also the mass contingency plans. I go into all of that, G1, GW1, GW2, GW3.
I mean, he got pretty technical with all of it,
Mm-hmm.
which
That-
is good.
the contingency plan, that should say also has standards for soil and groundwater, is that what that's supposed to say, or?
Where are we looking?
What are you
Right there.
Uh,
Right here. It's about midway down.
There's overlap, some overlap between the regulations because the mass contingency
Soil.
plan also has standards for soil and groundwater, I think is what.
That's what that's supposed to be.
The mass contingency plan has 3 different
Yeah,
standards.
so their GW1 is kind of like the
Groundwater
primary,
one,
because they're looking at the risk of ingestion. Their GW2 is for potential inhalation, and GW3 is once discharged to surface water and could cause harm to the environment. So it's a little different than the primary, secondary maximums.
and with all that information, he can't remember. Does he determine what level we are at with that? It talks about the groundwater 1, 2, and 3.
Well, we just, I need to clarify that we are testing at the GW1 standard.
Right, okay.
And then just kind of explain what those other two standards
Okay.
are for. So we're testing at
The
3 parts per
groundwater one,
billion.
right, which is at the ingestion
Yep.
level.
And if we
with
were up
water.
above 5,000 parts per billion, we would be falling into the next category. Then if we go over 50,000 parts, we would fall into the next one.
I have another question if we've worked that paragraph out.
Okay.
The second to the last paragraph under that timeline, just before the 523 timeline.
Regarding other exceedances?
Yeah, exactly. That second sentence, that should just read, I guess, those are considered secondary contaminants. Can we just line out the 3 words before that, or, I'm not sure what, it says secondary maximum MCL, secondary contaminants.
Well, and I was a little confused with, I know we talked about that, but I don't know that we talked about what our,
Well, no, but it's just talking about iron, manganese, chloride, dissolved solids. Those are all secondary contaminants, I think, is what the intent of that statement is right there. I'm not sure what those 3 words preceding that would mean, but
and it was the arsenic that we had. And I agree. I think that,
well, arsenic would be a primary, wouldn't it?
it doesn't say if it's primary or not.
Well, but we're looking at drinking water, so it's only,
This was
oh,
groundwater.
that's groundwater.
And further on down the
He does, it's the maximum MMCL? No.
well, I guess I'm just saying in that the context of that sentence, the first sentence talks about these various minerals and dissolved solvents. Dissolved solids, and then I think the intent is to just say those are considered secondary contaminants. They're not primary contaminants because they affect taste, color, odor, that type of thing.
Right.
And then about 2/3 of the way down, where the standard for 1,4-dioxane was exceeded at the 5 well locations, that should probably state for drinking water. Is that?
That's the groundwater wells.
But I mean, I understand that it's the ground, but isn't it only the drinking water standard that was exceeded, or?
Yeah, that's the standard we're testing everything with, is the.
We're using the drinking water standards.
Okay. So that's understood then.
Yeah, I also remember there being a thing about where the water was draining to. It says the 5 wells, most of them were in the northwestern portion of the landfill, but there was an important point of like which direction they were draining to.
And that's
I don't
not.
think that's in here anywhere, but the important information.
I don't think it actually states what wells were positive. But I agree, it would be helpful to have that in the minutes.
We do have the wells.
It does. Where's that? Which one's that? Oh, okay. Right, and so after that statement, it should say, like you saying that it
I don't remember exactly how they worded it, it was part of the presentation. So
That it was flowing opposite direction.
I'll have to look at the video.
Maybe it was just the flow of the groundwater that they mentioned.
Yeah, they did mention what direction it moves.
So that, I mean, the 5 wells were all mostly in the northwest direction, is that correct, were the positive?
Yep.
So I think that was the general direction of the flow, because weren't we talking about what the nearest residences were on that side?
Or how it would have gotten from draining that direction, how it would have gone down to the pond.
Right,
South.
but yeah,
Direction.
I agree, that should be in there, it was a pretty important point, so.
And the paragraph right below that, when it states, in terms of risk, there are no drinking water or private wells where 1,4 dioxide has been identified. I know we were specific about what wells, within what range the wells were tested. I mean, because that's like just a blank statement, but wells were only tested within a certain range.
There was no testing, it was just a range of saying what the closest wells were.
Okay,
So we can make sure that number's in there.
no drinking water. So drinking water and private wells, but they don't necessarily test for 1,4 dioxide anyway, right?
No, not for private wells.
But I remember the conversation was about which wells we've had tested within the, we had any,
Just at the landfill.
oh, just the
all.
landfill.
Yeah.
Okay. But didn't we talk about like within what range any wells were located?
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
a survey and there was a certain distance that there are no wells.
Yeah, I think we should put that in there. So we'll wait and look at these minutes again for after corrections.
Yeah, I'll have to basically just sit down with the video. And
I know, there was a lot of,
I think this came from, we get a transcript of the YouTube video and then we try to piece it. It's just like one huge long paragraph of all
okay,
the words,
okay.
and then it gets very difficult to break it down into actual minutes.
It's pretty good considering, I think, but there is a few points those points that should be in there. Okay, so we will table these minutes until next meeting. Next item on the agenda is well regulations. Review and discussion on Massachusetts model regulations for private wells versus current Board of Health regulations. I'll let Micah present.
So, yes, I don't know if we had a chance to read the kind of the cover letter to the model regulations, but the state released some new model regulations for local boards of health. And a few key points, well, the biggest key point is that this would include testing for certain PFAS substances, with how we've seen it popping up in towns around the area. I think it would definitely be good idea to add that. And then there were just a few different things they added in here, like they really, I guess there's been problems and they wanna make sure that wells are being drilled by licensed well drillers who are properly certified, and that they're going and doing all of their requirements as far as reporting all the well drilling logs and everything like that. I had some notes on some of the differences here. So our regulations do not have any definitions. I think we should definitely add, like, of all the just various terms. So this clarifies what a private drinking well is. It goes a little bit more about differentiating between that and the irrigation well. The only other differences was there was a few differences in some setback distances from our current regulations. And then there was just a little bit different wording on what we issue when we get the test results and it passes. It's a water supply certificate that we'd be issuing. And then our regulations also have a bunch of the water quality. We have a bunch of extra stuff on there that some of it's more related to just like the aesthetics of the water, but aren't really related to the safety of it. So they did kind of pare that list down a little bit. For example, we don't, we put turbidity on our requirements. That's just basically the cloudiness of the water. So that was not included in these model regulations. Things like turbidity, alkalinity, calcium, color, odor, sulfate, total dissolved solids. Those are ones we have that they do not have.
So they do not have PFAS on here though?
We do not at the moment, but they do in the new model regs.
So that's part of the model that we'll be adding.
Yes.
These are our old regs, right?
Those are
The
the
ones
old
we
regs,
have
the
right
current,
now.
current ones, yeah.
So the prior regs specified testing for those secondary contaminants and the turbidity and the.
Yeah, they specify that they should include, I don't know, it says to include the following, so I think those things are a pretty standard part of what you get if you go to a water testing lab.
Yeah.
But it's not a specific requirement that they listed out in the new model regulations, so I think it would be okay to keep everything they have on that list in there.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be.
I mean, I think it's good to
get a
know
water tests,
if those things exist, probably, right?
Yeah, you should definitely know, like if you have really high total dissolved solids.
Yeah.
Or sediment, or, what was the other one? Sulfate is like something that can be drinkable, but it will cause your water to smell.
Right.
Like sulfur.
Right.
So we also have in the state model the gross alpha screen, which is a radiation level, and radon. So
Yes,
we have those in ours.
I don't believe we did have radon in there.
They say when the well is drilled into bedrock, that they would require, in addition to the parameters listed above, the gross alpha screen and radon test. And then they have limits for that as well, but we don't have that in here. Maybe not every well needs it, but if it's going through bedrock, that might need it.
Yeah, that's something we can word ourselves to kind of make sure that's clear to people that only if it's going into bedrock, we would need that.
And they test for fluoride, but we don't now, is that? The new regs would test for fluoride.
I think it's not
Say
in there.
fluoride or meth or chloride?
Fluoride.
We just- Fluoride, I think I saw
on the new regs, yeah. It's interesting,
Yeah.
yeah.
Usually fluoride is added to water.
I
so
know.
I'm surprised they would do this in a private well, and they don't have much fluoride.
Fitchburg also just recently took these on, and they, I think they didn't quite stick to this exact list either, but pretty close as far as what they were including in theirs.
So it certainly makes sense to add the PFAS, I guess, right?
Right. For us to adopt all of these new model regs, we would need to pretty much go through every section and make sure that we're okay with it,
Yeah, so
and then vote on it.
I thought that perhaps this meeting, we could just kind of introduce it and discuss it, and then you all have a chance to review it on your own, and then, we can kind of go through each line and decide what we want to
Right.
do.
And this is the current one. So we can table this until next meeting, where we can put it on the agenda to go through it more specific.
What I'll do is I'll draft up something, and then we can use that as a starting point.
Okay.
Based on what we talked about today, I'll draft up something. And
So
then
is there
use that.
a way we could just kind of track the changes, maybe like if you go in based on the previous
Yeah.
regs that we had, and you can maybe just highlight the updates you've made to it, and we can compare it to the model, and that way it'd probably be a lot easier to.
Definitely, I'll do it just the same kind of way they introduce like new housing regs or something. I'll just put we added this or subtracted this kind of thing.
Good. Sounds good.
So currently, we don't require the certificate of the well
We just,
driller.
we issue like a well permit, but I don't think that we have been issuing that water,
Certificate.
whatever that wording was, the water certificate.
Water supply certificate.
There it is, yeah. And then I definitely wanted to put the definitions in there.
There's also a whole page of additional subjects for regulatory consideration. So
Yes,
they're
I
not part of
didn't
the main
really even-
document,
I
but they
didn't
do
really
have
get into
some
that,
extras if you want to add that.
Where are you seeing that?
Page 20, so it's right near the back of 2021. It's attachment, additional subjects for consideration, and it's got things like under, section 8, water quality testing requirements, it says Mass DEP recommends that Board of Health regulations require that potable wells meet Massachusetts primary and secondary drinking water standards and guidelines. So I guess that's not part of the main body of the requirement unless we want to specifically say that. You might want to specify the parameters for which the water is required to be tested rather than generally stating that the water must meet drinking water standards.
Well, here's the terms relation to maximum contaminant level, which is what we were getting a little bit with that.
So to get the certificate, to issue the certificate, I'm assuming that's gonna be based on primary standards, right? And the secondary is more informational, or?
Yeah, yep, so we'll base it off the primary standards, and then, so there could be secondary things like your, I think magnesium is too high and could cause your water to taste funny, or if you drink it for this amount of time, like it could lead to issues.
Yeah, so the certificate would have like maybe a notation or recommendation as to some secondary exceedances, or?
So it's kind of a two-part process, so we issue the permit to construct the well.
Right.
That's where we make sure they have a certified well driller, and
Yep.
then that's when we would give them information on what we're requiring to test and what the limits would be. Then they would go get that test, we would look at it, if it passes, then we would issue that certificate saying that
But-
the water quality passes.
Right, but I'm saying on the certificate, would it notate something about secondary
conditional.
uses that are?
On certain things. I
Certainly
mean,
can
I
if we
think,
want.
yeah, they were
So-
talking about either you get the water supply certificate, it's either, or it's denied, or there's a conditional water supply certificate.
Right,
So if
yeah.
there's things
So
that
you
are
might
on
need
there that,
filtration for iron or things like that, we can definitely.
and what about wells that are already in existence?
This would not apply to them.
This is just gonna
This is
apply
just
to
for
new,
new well
wells.
construction. Yeah.
And what about I'm assuming the new setback recommendations are more stringent than what we previously had, or?
Slightly more, here. So, there was just one change, which was they increased it to 100-foot setback from dry wells or collection leach fields, which is different than a septic leach field. I think it's more of a runoff control thing, or dry wells. So they increased that. And I noticed we have a setback that specifies it has to be 10 feet away from a building, which I think is a good thing to keep in there, so. And it's also kind of common sense, you're not gonna be drilling a well
right,
next
that
to
close to a
where
building.
buildings, but it's good to keep it in there, just so.
So
no one's tempted.
So I guess what I'm saying is we would keep ours except to the extent that the newer recommendations call for like an increase, and we would probably adopt the increase in our revised reg, or?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say so. That one, I don't think we really even come across a whole lot.
Unless, yeah, I mean, especially if there's hearings for variances, for septics and stuff, when it comes, we'll have to have these. Although, so, okay, so there was a hearing that came in for a septic system and with the well, so we would follow the new regulations that we adopt though, right? Even
We
though,
would do that, and we would have Title V regulations that we
Okay.
have to stick to. So there's kind of some overlap when it comes to a well that's going with the septic system.
because this is just gonna really fall for new construction and not really affect older wells when they come in. All right, so if we can review and if you can kind of do that, like
Sure.
maybe, and we can table it till next meeting.
And I'm gonna be wanting to do this for basically all of the Board of Health regulations, so, use this as a kind of template for how we go about it,
Okay.
so.
And I know there's supposed to be new model tobacco regs that, I don't know if Jones contacted you
I haven't
about
seen
coming
those
to.
yet.
I know that they're going to all the towns to do that, but when she does, we'll just get it on the agenda. Okay, next item on the agenda is Health Department updates.
All right, so the only update I put on the agenda would be the updates for the landfill, ground monitoring repairs, erosion control, and leachate systems. For the groundwater monitoring well repairs, basically just waiting for that area to dry out so they can repair those wells. We got pretty well inundated over the winter and had a big pile of snow frozen in there, so it's still wet. But I am in communication with the company as far as,
And we're all set to go with them. I mean,
Yeah.
Another company doing it.
Yep, and it should be all good to go as soon as it's dry enough for them. Erosion control, I don't really have any updates from the last meeting. And then the leachate systems, I coordinated with Tata and Howard and got the kind of information from when the project got started with previous director. So I got the scope of work, and it looks like we would need to start a request for proposals, like public bidding process, to get that project moving forward. They did encumber some funds for that, but they never did any kind of bidding or anything else to actually get the project moving ahead, because it's over $50,000. We'll have to do like a public bidding process.
I just correct my memory here. That's the erosion control is what's coming off the liner.
Yeah, that's.
And then the leachate system is what's down in the areas that you showed us that needs to be repaired.
Those are kind of like wells underneath the landfill that collects
Okay.
any kind of leachate.
And the
pump it
leachate
out.
system is what we need to get bids for.
That is what, if we wanted to continue moving that project, we would have to go out to bid on that, which I would need to find out if we have available funding or not first. So we'll kind of look at that closer to the end of the fiscal year and see what we have encumbered versus what we would need for remaining funds.
But if it was already established that it needed to be done previously, I mean, we need to do it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we need to go and ask for extra funds.
Yeah, I'm definitely talking to the auditor as far as that goes, and then seeing what we have in free cash towards the end of the year.
Which is June.
Yes.
Yeah, I just hate to see it get put out by the time you get the bids and.
Yeah, I mean, this project was sitting idle before I even started.
I know.
So I'm just, the funds were encumbered, all the costs have changed. For some reason, it never got put out to a public bid, so it kind of complicates things.
Do you have a ballpark of what the cost will be even before we get the bids, or you're saying
yeah,
we need
so-
to get the bids to know how much?
Ballpark is $145,000.
And what was allotted?
So there was some funds encumbered of $143,000, and some of that has already been spent out as far as like plan preparation and stuff like that.
Okay, so if I'm understanding, so it went out to this company, but it didn't go out on bid?
We contracted a company called CSI to basically give us an estimate on the repair cost.
Okay. So, I'm getting confused, so we have $140,000?
Right now we have about $110,000 that were encumbered for that project, but we still have, it would still have to go out for a bid through the public process to get that started.
So we may have to ask for
And
more
it's-
funding,
yeah,
to the tune of
I would
about
assume-
35,000?
I would assume it's gotten above 145 to, I really don't know at this point, because that was 4 years ago that was done.
So since it's been sitting that long, I mean, would it be worth sitting down and trying to see if we can't find the funds somewhere else, just to get it going and put it out to bid and see?
That is what I'm working on.
Yeah. Because I hate to see it go another year. By the time the bid process and gets, you know, if we wait till June.
We only have so much time to be working before it gets cold and frozen again.
Yep.
I mean, I know you inherited the issue, but
I mean, we have the parameters of the work that needs to be done pretty well defined,
Yep.
and it's pretty much once the money's found, it's ready, it's pretty much ready to go out to bid, then,
It is.
okay.
So who do you need to get the funding from? Is that where the mayor comes in? I'm just trying to clarify the process.
Yeah, that's kind of a conversation with the auditor and the mayor, which I have been having, so.
Well, if there's anything you need from us, just let us know.
I mean, if anything, I'm concerned that if it's a 4-year-old bid, that, estimate.
Right, it's gonna be, like I said, it's
higher,
gonna
the
be
price
higher.
of gas, the price of metals, everything's gone up, so I don't know if even getting it restored to 145 is gonna be
Right.
enough, so
Probably not.
we don't need to push.
But it's just where it's been sitting, I mean, I would think they'd, yeah,
Mhm.
so as long as you keep working on that part.
Mhm.
Okay,
Oh,
that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, new business, discussion on public comment policy at Board of Health meetings. I wanted it on the agenda because the way I understand everything, as chair, I can decide if anyone else speaks, public comment or whatever, except for public hearing. And if there's a public hearing, I set out the ground rules, which the last public hearing we had, there was one thing that I forgot, and that was to let the person speak and know that they had 5 minutes to speak, because that's usually what we do with public hearings. But I wanted to get input, and again, I've talked with other boards, listened to and researched with the Mass Association of Health Boards information and all that, and everything says the same thing. It's up to the chair, allow people to speak. I personally feel that I would like to have public input and on items in the agenda. I think it's, important to have residents speak up and share information. In trying to look at a way so it's consistent, because I wouldn't want anyone to think that there's bias if I let someone speak one time and not another time, I think there should be something that's fair and consistent. And I know one in Fitchburg, what they did, I kind of like the way they did it, is they have at the beginning of their meeting, on the agenda, there's room for public comment. And it's limited to 2 minutes on any item on the agenda. So that way it sticks to the agenda items, and, it happens, the public can see the agenda, they know what's on there, and if they have something to say regarding that particular item, then they can speak ahead of time. And then, because, we learn things from public. We want to work together. I feel strongly about that personally, and I won't speak for either of you, but, but then, when our role as a board in what we have to do in discussing things and, what our responsibilities are, can be on the agenda item, and we already have the input from the public, any resident that wants to add to that agenda item. So that's kind of what I was going to propose, is that we do something, or we don't have to do anything, we can leave it the way it is. The way all the things governing boards, it's, the chair can make the decision if anyone's going to speak or not. I would just rather be in a consistent manner and have something set at each meeting in the beginning if someone wants to speak on it.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be a permanent policy decision in the sense that it could be depending on the topics, It doesn't have to be something that every topic the board discusses on every agenda has to provide that, but certainly if it's a topic that we could get some helpful discussion on.
Right, so are you saying we don't have to have anything?
Well, I'm not recommending anything specific, but I'm just wondering, are you saying that you want to adopt a policy that automatically with every agenda item, we're going to provide a space at the end of that for public comment? Or?
No, it would be at the beginning. So if anything on the agenda, like call the meeting to order, and the next item would be public forum.
And how do you define the 2 minutes? Are you talking about 2 minutes total or 2 minutes per person?
2 minutes a person, limit it to 2 minutes. So if Mr. Russo wanted to speak about the health department updates under the status of the groundwater, he knows that's on the agenda, and if he has something to add that's specific to that, topic, he can speak ahead of time, knowing that that's on the agenda.
I'm sorry, I agree in principle with that. I just think that if you're gonna provide that for every agenda item at every meeting, and maybe you don't have 5 people, you have 20 people in here, because all of a sudden, it's starting to turn into a public hearing atmosphere. You might be adding another 30 minutes to every agenda item. So I think you have to kind of pick and choose where it's a topic that we can get some useful discussion on versus.
Right, and in the way, it would have to be information that's pertinent to that topic that's not already been said. So in order to, in that scenario, that does worry me, and then you're right, that ends up being like a public hearing.
Well, I think when we
not.
have an issue that we really need the public's input, or we feel that it's fair, the public should have input before we make any decision, then that should be a public hearing.
And it would be as a public hearing,
Right.
but, I don't know, I was just trying to, Shelley?
I just wonder if it'd make more sense to have the comment after we do our discussion, because what if they're gonna ask questions that we're gonna address in a few minutes, and when they see the topic, they don't know what we're gonna say or do, and so they may not have a fully formed comment until they hear what we're doing about it, and then wanna comment upon that, rather than having their, just a free-for-all of comments, and then try to address each of those during the meeting.
Right, and that's the free-for-all comments, it has to be pertinent to the topic, and that's what I was trying to think of how to, way to.
But the topics are kind of vague, so I don't know if
Yeah.
that's helpful for the public to know what their response will be, or if they want to hear what we've done so far and then comment beyond that.
We could do it at the end, or we could just leave it the way it is. I just don't want to, generally it's worked okay, I think, when there's been public input, tried to be, let the public speak, any residents speak if they have something to offer and share. Sometimes, there's been a few times where comments are not really related, appropriately to the topic maybe, but for the most part, I think it's been, with everything, I've thought about it, and it's just, if it's just my decision, I suppose it could stay that way as, keeping order, and if it gets out of hand, I can leave it the way it is, but I didn't want anyone to be, thinking I'd be biased if I let certain people speak and certain people don't speak. Like last meeting, I think it went well, I made it clear ahead of time, and, that we were gonna ask questions of the people there and stuff,
Well, I like the idea of having, some sort of boundary on it, but, an appropriate place for it to happen, so that people feel listened to and that we're responsive to those comments and questions, but, where's the best place to put that? I don't know, maybe after would be better, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think after makes sense, like you say, just so that, we're more focused and there's more background information available that maybe we can.
Right, maybe something.
and it's still, if anyone gets out of, if it gets out of hand, or it starts to look like, you've got 30 people wanting to speak, then, as chair, I can still stop that, or, but, right? Even if it's written there, I can still, as chair, I still govern, if people are out of order, or if it gets to be, too much discussion, then we just move it to if it's looking like it's a public hearing, but, where public comment is so great, then we just
Then we
change
may
it.
want to have a separate meeting for that, and designate
Right,
as such.
right. So, do we want to make a motion to
So
have
I
it
guess,
as, or just leave it as is?
well, again, I'm concerned about what, is this a policy we're adopting, or is it just kind of something from agenda to agenda that we will kind of, depending on what topics come up?
Well, I guess I really wanted your feedback, you
Yeah.
know, on, we can even leave it the way it is. As long as, I mean, I don't feel
I-
there's been any, you know, negative about how we've allowed people to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly in favor of the intent of it.
Is there an official policy, into discussion on public comment policy, do we have an official policy? We don't.
Yeah,
So it's sort of creation of
It's
a,
basically if you want to speak, you request the
right.
chair that
It's the
speaks.
chair that would be.
And she says your name.
Yeah, and but I just want to make sure, I mean, I feel I've always been objective and clear about, you know, allowing people, the public, any resident
do
to
you want
speak.
people to notify you ahead of the meeting that they intend to speak, or leave it open? So if something comes up that they need to comment on, they can do it spontaneously.
No, because then, you know, like you said, there's things that we may discuss that, you know, people might want to comment on after the fact. I just want to make sure, you know, going forward that it's fair, but it's also in order, and,
Well, what if we have, you know, our meeting, so we can kind of go at our own pace there, and then at the end, after the new business, before we adjourn, we have an open forum for if people want to make a public comment, and limit that to 2
related
minutes.
to the agenda.
Related to the agenda, yes, and
Yes.
make it a 2-minute limit.
How's that sound to you?
Yeah, I'm,
So not do a policy
Not a
on it.
policy.
Okay, sounds good to me. All right, so we're getting ready to adjourn. Any public comment? Please state your name and city of residence and limit it to 2 minutes.
Antea, 444
You don't have to give the
Summer.
address, just the
Okay.
city.
I just wanted to ask Micah if he received any response from the mayor for the letter that you gave him last time.
No, I did not.
Pardon?
No response.
No response.
I did talk to him in person and we did discuss it. I guess that would be a response, but no like written response.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, thank you. Alan Russo, Gardner resident. Just a couple of things. First of all, I did get a copy of the letter that was sent. I think, was it sent on February 24th to the mayor? Or
Sounds
was it
about right.
something?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds about right. I
Okay.
don't know, but it sounds about right.
Thank you for doing the letter.
Yeah.
I realize quite a bit of work probably went into that, it was almost 2 pages, with 4 attachments, I think, to it, A, B, C, and D. So my question, one question that I have is, on the attachment C was the 2010 letter. And I read through that. It was done by Colville and Brown, who was the company before CEC that did the monitoring. It was signed by Phil Jagoda, I noticed. Phil Jagoda was the gentleman that now works for CEC that presented at the last Board of Health meeting. But what I really am still unclear on, that maybe you could pursue as a follow-up, is why this happened to begin with. I mean, I read through the letter, it's got a lot of the reg stuff in there, it's got a lot of the prior tests, but what it resulted in was you don't have a test history on 1,4-dioxane at the DEP regulated level. So I don't know how we could be in that position now, because a lot of questions were asked about, well, what's the history, what's the history? And then the person at the last Board of Health meeting, the LSP, and I forget the gentleman's name, it was John, I think, he said, well, you should wait and get a history. And I went, wait a minute, we would have had a history if we didn't execute this email. So I'm not sure what other information surrounds this. If you have that, fine, share it. If you don't, then maybe you can take that as an action item. But I read through this thing and I said, there's something wrong, because one of the wells that got damaged, they said, don't do it at the higher level, at the lower level, raise it up to the 250. for all of the wells and all of the surface water locations except two, 13D and 96D, I think it was. And then 96D gets damaged in 2017. And Mike pulled all that data together, which is very helpful. You know, this thing you put together was, so I put this together with a letter, and I said, how could this happen? So then we were down to one well that was testing at the right level for the 1,4-dioxane. So I just think that it was a good meeting. I'd like to compliment you on the meeting, that you held that. I'd like to compliment you on the letter to the mayor. I think those, as a resident in a butter property, and someone that's very impacted by the off-site contamination of 1,4-dioxane, I want to make sure you understand I appreciate the work you've done to further get at this and review it. So that's the message I want to leave you with. And any more you find out, I mean, your letter was very specific in the end about we want a price for an estimate cost for an LSP, licensed site professional, and we need to come up with some funding sources so we can determine our protocol for investigating, you know, what's the cost? You know, again, going back 7 months to our original meetings on this, how do we turn off, where's the cause of this thing? Is it the sludge landfill, the solid waste landfill? How do we stop the cause so that it's not continuing to come out and get worse? That's my main thing. And I don't know what the state protocols are for that, but, you know, seems like more testing, developing the plume, so to speak, and having a professional that can help guide you with that. Because it's very technical stuff. I've already heard you talk about the last meeting. It is technical stuff. It's confusing, but to have them come in and help lay out a protocol for finding out what the source is, so we can turn it off. I'm pretty sure we heard from the last meeting, it's not the erosion problem. It's not the erosion, because he said that the liner was not damaged. It was the stuff on top of the liner that was eroded. That's what I thought I heard. So that means it's the leachate system underneath, or it could be the sludge landfill. It's a whole other thing. That's not, those wells are not tested for 1,4-dioxane. So there's other things going on there to get the cost. So I'm sorry, I probably took more than 2 minutes, but thank you. I think it's really important. All your words about the public coming to me. I find that most meetings I go with this time allocated for the public, it's much better, the end result of the meeting conclusions. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, I appreciate the opportunity. I don't think the
Can you
board
state
of...
your name and your
I'm
residence?
sorry. Old male resident. I don't think you've ever had a public turnout like this on a regular basis in the past. And, you know, there's a reason that we're all here, is because we care. And we want to work together with the Board of Health for the betterment of the community. The letter was sent to the mayor, there's no response, so what do you do from here? There needs to be a follow-up, because, you know, here we're 9 months down the road since we started first discussing this 1,4-dioxane. It's got to be addressed, because everybody sitting here is going to continue to push it until we get some answers. Talking about the money, getting additional money. Now, we discussed in the meeting that the leachate system needs to be repaired.
I want to clarify on that. We're not on any orders. That's just something that we would like to repair. It's not a requirement. We're not on any direct orders to repair it. It's not something that needs to be repaired. It's something we want to repair.
Okay, but it needs to be repaired, correct?
Not correct, no.
It's
Well,
not a mandated.
If it's not mandated, but why are we repairing it?
Because we would like to, because they're updating the pumping station. They just thought it would be a good idea to do so, along with all of our leachate pumps.
How many pumps are working today?
I believe it's two pumps.
And how long is this going to continue that the other 4 are down, and there's 2 pump chambers down out of the 3?
I don't know.
I think we're getting off on.
Well, I know, but see, this was.
Yeah, but, you know, this is the whole
People
thing.
who wanna say they work with the Board of Health don't go accusing someone
Nobody's
who's not hearing
accusing.
about generations of people's family
Yeah.
to state officials. Like, you don't say that if you
Yeah.
wanna work with us, so that makes it much more difficult.
Yeah, but
Making
here-
slanderous
this
statements
is-
towards
this is-
public officials.
This is a past agenda item, and it wasn't re-brought up tonight.
Well, it wasn't, but the agenda was clear on what we were gonna discuss, and that was on, I mean, ongoing things that are being done, you know, through the health department's office is not something that, what the board is gonna be doing anything, or needs to hear every little detail about, and that's the purpose of the board. You know, it's, you know, to update us, but that's what Micah did.
But it's old business that's still outstanding.
And he discussed that and reviewed and discussed the whole issues about the landfill and the ground repairs and the erosion control and the leachate system.
Okay, but moving on,
Well,
Last 13
and-
minutes.
Yeah.
Well,
No, this is where, you know, there should be, you know, I welcome comments on what we discussed tonight, to go and bring up and, you know, what we should be doing, and, I mean, I think that as a board, we've been very, very conscientious about this issue, and have been, and continue to be so. I mean, I think we've been very proactive and very conscientious in trying to stay on top of everything. And, you know, we've been in touch with DEP, we've been in touch with EPA. You know, we're doing what we need to be doing at this point in looking out for the health and trying to work with people on that. And I think the comment about, yeah, you know, it's not.
Can I add
Yeah,
to that? I
please.
think we all hear you, we want to be responsive and compassionate. Sometimes these things take time and it's very frustrating. And when we had that meeting last time, I took away a couple of things, which was like, okay, so we don't really know why this is in Mr. Russo's pond. Like, we can't really figure that it's the downstream flow from somewhere. The DEP wants more data, you know, they said they want more history going, I don't know what happened to the history going backwards, but they want more data going forward before I asked that specific question, like, what do we do to mitigate this? And they said, we don't know, we need more data. So we're kind of hamstrung a little bit ourselves in how we're gonna move forward with this, and we're happy to help, but it's not at all clear, like, why it's there, what we're supposed to do about it, and we do have repairs to make. And so I want to make sure that we are, you know, getting the funding and moving forward with the repairs that are necessary. Whether they actually solve this problem or not will remain to be seen, because we need to get more data. We need that extra testing, and we need to know, you know, where this could have come from. It's still kind of an unknown. But I feel like we're trying, and I'm sure it's frustrating on that end as well, because it's sort of moving through the winter, you know, when we talk about the last 8 months, it's like, well, how much can we do when everything's frozen? It's not like we don't want to do more testing, but the testing is usually done in April, right? So we're kind of waiting for that time point. And I think that reason is because of the season and the temperatures and things like that, but.
And working together, yeah, I mean, it's hard when then, you know, particularly some of the responses you send that are a little bit accusatory, and, you know, it's like, we are doing what we need to do, and above that, in trying to keep this topic active and aggressive, trying to find out what's the reasoning for it. So, I mean, I don't think we've stopped since it came up.
well, you know,
And there's not really a place for an argument on it, you know, one way or the other, so.
no, but see, the emails with the DEP, the EPA, the Board of Health, keeps everybody in the loop, okay? Now, I just want to make one,
One quick one, and then we're gonna adjourn.
this follows along with open meeting law regulations. And the new model regs from the state to the BOH, I would like to see those. I would make a recommendation that any new information that is going to be presented to the Board of Health at the meeting be included as part of the agenda as an attachment, okay? And the regulations for public open meeting law suggest that agenda items need to be made clear. In addition, to provide the background information to the agenda item, which could be easily attached to the agenda, because I would like to read those, and then we as the public know what you have in front of you that we don't have to look at. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, we can set next meeting. I believe the 21st is that a holiday? Is that a holiday?
Day after Easter, that's Patriots Day,
Right.
21st. It's also the 28th.
I'll be available the 28th if that's.
I believe I can do the 28th also.
We need to sign the January.
Oh, great. Okay. Alrighty, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Motion is, meeting is adjourned at 5:40 PM.